Welcome to the Explainer. All right, today we're diving into one of the most powerful, and let's be honest, one of the most frustrating parts of Amazon Web Services, IAM, or Identity and Access Management. If you've ever tried to build anything on AWS, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the gatekeeper, it's the security guard, and yeah, it's often the source of that dreaded access denied message. Let's figure out why.
Okay, let's start with a feeling I know you've had. It's that frustrating, dead-end wall of an access denied error. You're following the tutorial, you're in your own account, you're trying to do something that should be simple and nope, denied. It feels like a bug, right? An obstacle you just need to get around.
So, when you're stuck, what's the first answer you find on every forum? It's the easy fix, the shortcut. Just go find the administrator access policy, attach it, and boof, the problem vanishes. It works, and it works instantly. But it also gives you that little feeling in your gut that you just did something you really shouldn't have. That is an instinct you have to learn to trust.
To understand why that shortcut is so dangerous, let's just step away from the keyboard for a second. Imagine you're in charge of security for a huge office building. You've got different people coming and going, accountants, engineers, janitors, contractors. Would you give every single one of them a master key that opens every single door? Of course not. That would be an absolute security nightmare.
And that's the core idea right there. Your AWS account is the building. And IAM? Well, IAM isn't some random obstacle. It's the security system. Its entire job is to create and manage all the keys, making sure the right people get access to exactly the right doors, and absolutely nothing more.
So when you first create an AWS account, you're handed that one all-powerful master key. In AWS, this is called the root user. This identity can do everything. It can override any restriction, it can delete your entire company, and it can never, ever be fully locked down by other IAM policies. It's the ultimate key. So the rule for the root user is super simple, and honestly, it's not up for debate. You use it one time to set up your first administrative user and your basic security settings. Then you lock it away. You put multi-factor authentication on it, you store the credentials somewhere safe, and you never, ever use it for day-to-day tasks or, heaven forbid, put its keys inside an application. Okay, so if we're supposed to lock away the master key, how does any of this actually work? Well, the whole system is built on three core components, and really truly understanding the difference between them is the secret to mastering IAM. And here they are: users, roles, and policies. Now, they sound kind of similar, and people mix them up all the time. That confusion, that's the root cause of probably 90% of all security mistakes in AWS. So let's break them down one by one. Let's kick this off with the single most critical distinction in all of IAM. Users are for people and roles are for machines. A user is a human being sitting at a keyboard. A role is for a piece of code, a service, or a service that needs to do a job. If you only remember one thing from this entire explainer, please let it be this. So a user is an identity for a human. The keyword here is persistent. They have long-lived credentials, a password you log in with, or access keys you put on your laptop that stick around forever until you decide to delete them. And because they're persistent, they can be lost, stolen, or accidentally leaked. A role, on the other hand, is completely different. It has no permanent credentials to steal. It's an identity that's designed to be assumed by something else, like an application running on an EC2 server. When that app needs to talk to a database, for example, it temporarily assumes the role, gets a set of credentials that only last for a short time, does its job, and then those credentials just expire. They become completely useless. It's just a fundamentally more secure way to operate.
Okay, so we've got keys for people, users, and we've got temporary keys for machines, roles. But what do those keys actually unlock? That's where policies come in. A policy is basically the rule book. It's a document written in a format called JSON that is the literal set of rules. It says precisely what a user or a role is allowed or denied to do. This is the actual language of permission in AWS.
Understanding these building blocks is half the battle. But to really grasp IAM, you have to understand the consequences of getting it wrong. Because in the cloud, the stakes are incredibly high, and the time it takes for a mistake to become a disaster isn't measured in days or hours, it's measured in minutes. And here's why this is so critical. If a developer accidentally commits a user's permanent access keys to a public place like GitHub,
There are automated bots out there constantly scanning for exactly that mistake. The time between that key appearing online and an attacker using it to get into your account can be less than 5 minutes. This isn't a hypothetical threat. It happens all the time. Now, leaked keys are the most dramatic failure, but they're definitely not the only one. There are all these other quieter mistakes. Things like giving an application a role that can access every database when it only needs one. Or, and this is a big one, forgetting to delete a user when an employee leaves the company, leaving a digital backdoor just sitting there, wide open. These are the classic missteps that lead to major breaches.
So, how do we stop this from happening? How do we build systems that are secure right from the start? Well, it's not about memorizing hundreds of complicated rules. It really all comes down to a single guiding principle.
It's called the principle of least privilege. And the philosophy is actually pretty simple. Every user, every role, every single piece of code should have the absolute minimum set of permissions it needs to do its job and nothing more. Not the permissions that are the most convenient, the minimum permissions. It feels a little restrictive at first, I know, but this is the absolute foundation of a secure system. And this table just lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got the wrong way, the shortcut, using administrator access to solve some small problem. The result? That identity can now do anything. And if it gets compromised, your entire system is at risk. But on the right, you have the right way, a super specific policy that only grants the permission to S3 list bucket. Now the identity can do its job, and if something goes wrong, the potential damage, what we call the blast radius, is tiny and completely contained. So the next time you hit that access denied wall, just resist that urge to reach for the admin hammer to make the problem go away. Instead, just pause and ask the right question. What is the absolute minimum permission this thing actually needs to do its job? Answering that question every single time is how you build the right security instinct. It's the difference between a quick fix and a truly secure foundation.